Hi, welcome to Real Talk. This is our podcast from Ken Crotts and Company. I'm Ken Crotts, and I just wanted to share with you the benefits that I've learned and the things that I've learned over the last 35 years of selling real estate in the Puget Sound area. One of the things that I want to do with this podcast is really just put out the things that I've learned. But as a broker of 35 years and an investor just as long, I'm so immersed in real estate that very often I don't know what your questions are. So our goal here is to pull back the curtain and give you the inside track and understand the things that insiders understand about real estate. Ultimately, I want to share everything I know with you, but also I want to answer your questions. So the goal of this podcast is going to be to answer your questions and get to the root of those things that might be an unknown to you or might even be a fear about real estate. Real estate's a very, very popular topic, and you can't go anywhere without somebody talking about real estate. And so this is our first podcast, by the way. So for our initial podcast, I wanted to address really the elephant in the real estate market right now. Is the market is so hot and it's so crazy. What's driving it? I've been putting out all videos and marketing for a long time, and I get a lot of comments. And I've recently noticed a lot of comments on the videos that we put out with people being a little not upset, but not understanding why the market is the way it is. I mean, how is it that prices are being driven up in such a rapid pace that is causing buyers not to be able to buy and renters to be priced out of the market? What is it that's making this market so crazy? Some of the comments I've seen on some of our postings have suggested that it's the real estate agents that are driving the prices up. And that, or it's investors and flippers that are coming in and fixing up houses and stealing people's equity. And I'm going to try to explain that in a way that will give you a deeper understanding of why the market is the way it is and who the players are and what their interests are and what their role is. There's very few players in the real estate market right now that are not out to do or have a beneficial effect on the market. So today's show, I'm going to cover that. Now, the biggest problem that we have is that people are feeling the pinch in the real estate market. So what is causing this prices to go up in such a rapid fashion? It's not uncommon to hear of buyers putting offers on houses and going 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, and in the core markets, even 200,000 or more over asking price. How does that happen? Now, is that the real estate agent's fault? I can tell you as a broker of 35 years, if I don't market the house as a fiduciary, meaning that my interests are aside and the seller's interests are in the forefront of what we're trying to achieve. If I don't put their interests first and get them top dollar, by definition, I'm not fulfilling my duties to my seller. And if you find an agent that's not doing their best to get top dollar for the seller, they're not going to last very long because those sellers won't tolerate it and they'll simply fire them. So, and sellers have every right and entitlement to expect the highest price they can get. It's part of the market. Buyers, on the other hand, in a seller's market like this are feeling the pinch. They're suffering. There's 8, 9, 10, 11 offers on each property that they're going to look at if they're looking in core markets and at core type of properties. And it's a very, very frustrating, especially to see the prices going up and to make multiple offers and not, and missing out the fun of buying a home and the excitement and enthusiasm of envisioning yourself in a new property and your new life there quickly fades as it turns into a real frustrating experience. So what's happening? What's driving the shortage of houses in the marketplace? Well, the pandemic has had an effect. Initially, I thought that when that came out, I thought that it was going to, drive the market down and cause a balancing, because even before January of last year, the market was still pretty hot. Not like it is now, but it was still hot. There was still a shortage of properties for sale. And there's a fundamental thing that we need to understand. Number one, you have a pool of buyers that need housing, or you have a pool of people, citizens that need housing. Whether you're renting or whether you're buying a house, you need a roof to put over your head. Number two, there's a finite number of houses available. Right now, there's an inequity, or there's an imbalance of the number of buyers to the number of sellers. It's not that anybody's being greedy or anything like that. It's just an imbalance in the market. Over the last year with the pandemic, we've seen that buyers were still willing to go out and buy properties, but sellers were much more reluctant to have people into their homes. I mean, understandably, with what was going on, you want to think of your safety first, and if you didn't have to sell your home, some sellers were holding their houses off the market. We're starting to see that lighten up a little bit, but even when sellers do come back out and are putting their houses on the market at a more rapid rate, we're still going to have that shortage of housing compared to the number of buyers that need to buy a home. And I'm going to share with you a couple of the reasons why I think that is the case. Number one, I've heard a lot of people moving out of the area, that there's a big exodus from Seattle. Well, that doesn't mean there's an exodus from the Puget Sound. I have an article here from, who is it from? From Puget Sound Regional Council. That really shows that while people are moving out of core markets like Seattle, they're simply moving out to the suburbs. So we still have people moving out of state, but there's still quite an influx of people coming from out of state. In fact, the number one markets coming into Seattle are San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. The big metropolitan areas are still seeing a big influx of people coming from other major metropolitan areas to the Seattle area. So downtown core Seattle, there's an out migration, but they're only moving out to the suburbs. They're not moving out of state. They're not all moving to Texas. They're not all moving to Idaho. There's still an in-migration of people coming for the jobs and the high-tech services that we have here. Seattle is a mecca for job growth, and it's been that way for quite some time. So we aren't diminishing the number of people, the demand through in-migration or out-migration. Number two, demographics. The millennial generation is very interesting. They are larger than the boomer generation. They're significantly larger than the X generation that followed them. And as the first millennials came of age, where were we at in our economy and in our country? We were in the middle of a Great Recession. Millennials witnessed their parents going through hardship, job loss, real traumatic financial losses of their homes, and bankruptcies abounded. So really the initial wave of millennials that were going to come into the market in 2010, 11, 12, and 13 were kind of held back because of what they were, because of what they were witnessing, that home ownership wasn't a panacea, it wasn't a dream. In many cases, it was a real nightmare. I personally closed over 215 short sales, and I can tell you that it took the banks a long time and the federal government a long time to get the system put together right in a way that didn't really torture struggling homeowners in a way that caused a real traumatic life event to lose a house during the Great Recession. So they were held back, and now we're in 2021. We're seeing the early adopters, the early buyers in the millennial generation buying their second homes, but we're seeing the entire millennial generation come of age where, life being what it is, they develop relationships, they build families, they have significant others, they become more affluent as their jobs afford more income and more purchasing power, and they're wanting to buy en masse. So you have a large demand for properties and a large number of people coming into the market. Now remember, it doesn't matter if they're renting or buying. If they're coming to the point where they're affluent enough to buy a property and want to buy a property, we need a roof for them to fit under, whether they're buying or renting. They all have to be housed. Now, over the past 20 years, environmental and growth regulations through the 90s and 2000s really were focused on mitigating sprawl, keeping the population into a more confined area, saving energy, creating efficiencies in the delivery of the utilities and the roads by mitigating sprawl. And they were also built at a time where the X generation in the marketplace that were the primary buyers weren't driving prices up and weren't creating a huge need for more homes. As a result, 20 years of regulations have come around, and now it is much more difficult to bring houses online. It's just tough. And whether you're talking about developments and professional developers like Shea Homes or Classic American Homes, any of those builders, it takes years to get a plat or a new neighborhood to come online to where they have finished lots, so a builder can buy that lot and build a house. It also takes a very long time to build a house. So there are several ways that we can increase the demand for these buyers that are in the market. So let's go through this. Number one, building new neighborhoods, the large plat, the new construction developments, and that's what we think of when we think of new inventory. It's expensive. It's a very risky process. Through the Great Recession, a lot of the small developers went out of business. We don't have the infrastructure now or the financing for small developers to develop as much as they had. And as a result, we've had big national developers come in, and they're the ones that are really providing the bulk of new construction in the area. The second area that we find new housing, or improved housing in this case, would be investors that buy houses in rehab or flippers. Now, for the sake of I will use the term flipper or flipping, because that's a commonly understood terminology to describe somebody who buys a house, rehabs it, or rebuilds it and resells it. Flipping, in the classic definition, it has nothing to do with rehabbing a house or improving it. A true flipper buys or puts a house under contract or buys it cheap and flips it, sometimes even before they own it, for a profit without doing anything to the house. So when you say flip or flipper, which is something of a derogatory term in the community, I believe right now, you're really describing somebody that puts a property under contract, flips it for a profit. Right now, these are really commonly known as wholesalers. If you want to meet a wholesaler, go online and say, I want to sell my house for cash, or put an ad out on Craigslist. You'll get wholesalers calling you right and left. And what a wholesaler does is they will come to your house, they'll put it under contract, and then what they do is they sell their position in the contract to another buyer for an assignment fee. So as an example, I know I'm getting off a little bit here, but we'll make this real brief. As an example, you have a $200,000 house that a seller wants $200,000 for it. A wholesaler will come along and give him a $200,000 contract that says and or assigns. The wholesaler then goes out and advertises to their database or out into the community and advertises that they will sell that house for $200,000 or $220,000 with a $20,000 assignment fee. And another person will come along, pay him a $20,000 assignment fee, and buy the house for $220,000. That's really what a classic flipper is what wholesalers are doing now. Now, the investor that buys a house, rehabs it, and then resells it is really improving the community. They are typically taking houses that nobody else wants, that are uninhabitable or unfinanceable, meaning they don't meet the basic guidelines for conventional FHA or VA loans, and makes them financeable by rehabbing them or improving them to a certain extent. Now, there's lots of stories out in the community about rehabbers or people that have rehabbed houses done poor quality, and that's something that any rehabber that does poor quality, doesn't get permits, is taking a big chance that they're going to get sued. For the most part, all the rehab houses that I see now, they're actually doing very good jobs. There are national companies. One of them is called Westwood, which is they do rehabs and buy and improve and resell the houses on a national scale, and they do an absolutely beautiful job. The nice thing about that is you're taking a house in a community, you're raising its value, you're bringing in a good buyer or a good tenant to live in that property to be better neighbors than the one that didn't take care of the house or might have been a drug house or whatever. That means that they're increasing the value of their neighbors' homes, and they're increasing the value of the community. So flippers are doing a great job. They're really taking old dilapidated properties and improving the existing stock of housing by increasing the quality. And that brings us to the next one, which is the next way to increase inventory or increase the housing inventory would be building on infill lots. Now, this is something I would like to see the cities get much more aggressive at pushing to have done. An infill lot is, for example, I bought a house in a little city called Covington, not too far away. I bought the house and it had a second lot behind it that came with it. We were able to rehab the house, sell it, and then we turned around and sold the lot to a builder who's now building another home. So this doesn't require the extensive construction or site construction or any of that's required by a plat. Doesn't take that very long period of time, but they're adding another house to the inventory to help mitigate the demand that's out there. And you can find infill lots in every city and every county. They're everywhere. If the cities were, the problem or the challenge that I see is that the builders that are willing to take on infill lots have to have something of tough skin, because they still have to go through a fairly long and arduous application and mitigation process in order to get that house house under construction and eventually build a home and sell it to a willing buyer. So, but infill would be a great way. Loosening regulations on infill properties would be a great way to start creating construction on a larger scale and in a way that makes better use of existing municipal properties without adding having to extend water lines or sewer lines or add a bunch of infrastructure. It takes existing properties and adds to the tax base for the benefit of the cities and the municipalities, creates housing, as we've been talking about, and it just is a very efficient way, because it's something that the community at large has a desire to do. If you have a house with an extra lot and you need some funds or you have some financial hardships, you could sell off the lot and have a builder build a house. You could contract a builder to build a house and then sell that, or you could contract a builder to build a house. You move into it and either rent out or sell your existing house. There's a lot of efficiencies with that, and that's something that I think should be really well sought out by the municipalities, and to take down some of the barriers that builders have to go through in order to do that kind of construction. ADUs. And what is an ADU? It is an accessory dwelling unit. Now, some time ago, regulations regarding ADUs were loosened up a little bit as the county realized that we have need for housing for or accessory dwelling units for relatives. ADUs are generally limited in use and intended to be used for relatives or friends or guests of the owners. I'd say leave it to relatives. I don't know about friends and guests. Not intended as long-term housing, but consider this. A homeowner with enough land and ability builds an ADU and takes their parents out of a property in the city and moves them into the ADU to be closer to family and the services that they need. They just freed up another house in city that supplies another property to help satiate the demand for the large number of buyers that we have. So there's another way that we can help grow the number of roofs to deal with the number of bodies that we have to put under them. So, and that really kind of covers my thoughts on how to help address the housing shortage. There's really nobody at fault. It's as far as the housing prices going up. The interest rates are low, which makes low interest rates are in part help drive up prices because prices, you're really not qualified for a price of a house. You're qualified for a monthly payment, and that monthly payment buys more at a low interest rate than a high interest rate. So more people could afford higher prices, and in a high demand market, those prices get driven up, which is what we see happening now. So hopefully you take something away from this. I really want to impart to anybody that is watching this my desire to share with you my experience in real estate and to find out what your questions are. So this is really going to, my goal for this is for this podcast to be an Ask an Agent Anything. If you have a question at any point, write it down in the comments and we'll address it in the next podcast. Soon we'll be going live as we get things set up a little bit better and build a little bit more of an audience. But until then, stay safe, stay well, and thank you for taking the time to watch. Have a great day.